Attila the Hun was the leader of the ancient nomadic people known as the Huns, and he was the ruler of the now demolished Hunnic Empire, which he established. His name means little father, but according to some historians, that wasn't his birth name. He was known for being an incredible leader, but also for being ruthless, especially toward his enemies. What kind of things have you heard about Attila the Hun? Whatever you've heard, we bet you'll learn something new in this video, and maybe something even shocking. Welcome to Crazy Histories, where we bring you the craziest and weirdest facts from human history. Some of the things discussed in this video may be offensive or disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. He brutalized enemy forces. After his uncle's death, Attila inherited joint control over the Hun Empire. He and his brother's first step was to negotiate a treaty with the Eastern Roman Empire, in which Emperor Theodosius II agreed to pay about 700 pounds of gold annually as a promise of peace between the Huns and Romans. But only a few years later, Attila claimed the Romans had violated the treaty, even though there was no proof of that, and led a horrifying series of attacks through Eastern Roman cities. The Huns raided Roman provinces, looting and burning huge territories of the Roman East. No one was spared. The Romans were already very frightened of the Huns, having heard about them from the Germanic tribes who burst their borders, and the Huns' foreign appearance and unusual customs only intensified the Romans' fear. Their brutal methods and savagery made them incredible sackers of cities. They robbed and burned towns, villages, and church communities all along the eastern half of the Roman Empire. The Balkans, in particular, were reduced to rubble and ash, and some of the Roman borderlands were given over to the Huns after they were thoroughly pillaged because there was no way they could rebuild. With Hun forces looming just 20 miles of Constantinople, Theodosius was forced to make terms and agree to pay Attila the staggering sum of 2,100 pounds of gold per year for the Huns to leave the Romans in peace. This had a devastating effect on the Roman Empire and was one of the reasons for its eventual fall. Attila even killed family. After the peace treaty, the Huns returned to the Great Hungarian Plain. Sources are hazy about what happened there over the next several years, but one thing that is certain is that at some point Attila decided to challenge Bleda for sole power over the empire. Both brothers were born into the Hunnic Empire's ruling family in Pannonia, and they knew from a young age that they would jointly inherit the empire as adults. Even though he and his brother ruled well together, that was not enough for Attila, whose ambition and brutality meant that he wanted sole power. The Roman writer Priscus, who provided what was considered the most reliable Roman account of the Huns, claimed that in 445, Bleda, king of the Huns, was assassinated as a result of the plots of his brother Attila. Accounts say that Attila had his brother assassinated while he was hunting. Whatever the method, it was proof of Attila's brutality and ruthlessness. He invaded for a woman. In the spring of 450, Honoria, the sister of Valentinian III, Emperor of Western Rome, sent Attila a ring and asked him to help her get out of an upcoming marriage to a Roman aristocrat her brother was forcing her to marry. She did this because there was another Roman aristocrat she loved, and she wanted to marry him. Attila, who'd already had several wives at this point, believed Honoria's request was a proposal. He claimed her as his newest bride and demanded that half the territory over which Valentinian ruled should be given up as a dowry. At the same time that he announced that, he made preparations to invade the western provinces. He sent his demand not to Valentinian but to the senior emperor Theodosius, and once Theodosius received Attila's demands, he immediately wrote to Valentinian advising him to hand over Honoria to the Hun. Frightened of angering the Hun and being invaded again, Valentinian was furious. Hyacinthus, Honoria's servant who delivered the ring, was tortured to reveal all the details of his mistress' treason and then beheaded. Honoria said she never intended to propose to Attila and never wanted this to happen, but her brother, furious at his sister's scheming, was ready to send her across the Danube to calm Attila down. He eventually changed his mind, allowing her to marry the boring Roman aristocrat after all. Attila wouldn't give up so easily, however, and would go on to wage his next two military campaigns in Honoria's name: the Hunnic invasion of Gaul. Meanwhile, Emperor Theodosius had died, and his successor, the war-hungry Marcian, refused to continue to pay the annual tribute to the Huns. This enraged Attila and led him to decide to turn his arms against the weak realm of Valentinian instead of renewing his attacks upon the exhausted Illyrian lands, which he'd been pillaging non-stop. This wasn't the only thing that led him to the Gallic campaign. The king of the Vandals had sent many gifts to the king of the Huns and used all his craft to stir him up against the Visigoths. Gaiseric feared the vengeance of Theodoric because of the way he had treated his daughter and wanted to destroy or weaken the Visigothic nation. Early in AD 451, he went ahead with a large army that included not his own Huns but of the forces of all his German subjects. The army forced their way into the Belgic provinces, took Metz, captured many other cities, and laid waste the land, burning and robbing anything in their way. Because of this, there's almost no other man in all of recorded history that has been feared as much as Attila. Attila was known by the nickname the Scourge of God, referring to his reputation for creating a trail of devastation and horror wherever he went. Attila and the Huns were brutal. Attila did not raid peacefully or respectfully. First-hand accounts describe the savage screaming and other noise made by the Huns as they attacked their victims on horseback, slashing and stabbing anyone in their way, women and children included. Their skills on horseback from constantly traveling made the Huns especially terrifying. Sometimes they had a lasso-like tool, which they would use to entangle the enemy as they hacked them to death. The Huns also possessed a formidable new weapon, the recurve bow. Most Hun warriors carried bows made of wood, skin, horn, and bone. Unlike the Western bow, these weapons were made to curve back on themselves at the ends, which generated added force and made arrows fly with enough velocity to penetrate armor at 100 yards. Hun horse archers were famous for their ability to accurately fire their bows even while at full gallop, killing everyone in their path. In battle, they often ambushed their enemies in scattered bands, unleashing devastating swarms of arrows before riding back to safety. Once the enemy was weakened, the Huns would close in on them at close range and finish the job with spears, sabers, lassos, ensuring a horrible death for anyone in their way. Attila used all kinds of weapons. The Huns had a nomadic lifestyle which involved a lot of travel and relied heavily on robbing and plundering to survive. Attila knew that in order to make sure of the continued loyalty of his men, he would need to supply them with a constant supply of gold. To do so, he would have to set his sights on much bigger prizes than ever before, focusing his attention now on the Roman Empire itself. Once again, in order to extort money from the Romans, he needed to prove that he would become a big problem and a threat if they refused to pay up, especially since the new emperor was resistant. He decided the best way to do that was basically to find a Roman city and destroy it, reducing it to ashes. More like a fortress than anything else, the city of Naissus, modern-day Nis in Serbia, then part of the Byzantine Empire, was the intended target. Narcissus was the birthplace for many Roman emperors, including Constantine the Great himself, and it was besieged by the Huns in 441 AD. However, fighting primarily on horseback, the Huns weren't especially suited to take over the heavily fortified citadel, and Attila's first wave of mounted soldiers was easily driven back. Attila didn't let this deter him. The Huns overcame this impediment by making use of one of the simplest of siege weapons, the battering ram. The Huns started attacking different parts of the wall with these battering rams, and were ultimately able to overcome the city's defenses and breach inside. Besides being an important trade hub in the region, filled with all sorts of riches, Naissus was also an arms factory for the Byzantines. Attila took these weapons with him, as well as all the gold and riches there, and all the skilled workers he could find. He massacred the rest of the city's population, set it on fire, and then left. Several years later, when the Greek diplomat and historian Priscus of Panium went through it, Naissus was still in ruins and deserted, with the exception of a few sick people being cared for inside the church. If you enjoyed this video about the unspeakable things Attila the Hun did to his enemies, click the like and subscribe button for more crazy history stories where we bring you the craziest and weirdest facts from human history.